Arganissima, New York. Your exotic skin, hair, and beauty source, and your one-stop shop for all your natural and organic skin and hair care, featuring authentic organic Moroccan oil and prickly pear seed oil and much more. Bringing you only the best, straight from the source and proudly produced in the USA. So what are you waiting for? Shop today at www.arganissima.com. Arganissima, New York. Your beauty is our...
Folks, welcome back to the iHealth channel, the FitnessFab channel, and iHealth Radio with your host, Hurricane Age. New day, new show, new topic. And I'm excited about today. Specifically, it's going to sound fun. I'm always excited about all the shows and all the guests and all the topics. But today is going to be a fun show for a reason, because it's a sport that I discovered personally. And, I just I'm learning about, and I'd like to share that with you. And I have someone who's an advocate, someone that really is out there promoting this sport. And it's a good activity. And we're talking about fitness. This is the FitnessFab channel primarily. And one of the key things in fitness is that you want to diversify. And there's different styles and different forms as in methods, as I had stated in previous shows. And to each his own, as we say. This could be something for everyone. This could be something that, anyone can actually practice. And I think, and we'll learn more about it today, that it will be fun for family, for work, and many things. So I'll leave it at that. So I have with me today, Lynn Cherry, and she's going to talk to us about pickleball. Now, I have literally discovered this a few months back as a concept. I still don't know much about it. Lynn, welcome to the show, and thank you for actually giving us the opportunity to learn about pickleball.
It is absolutely great to be on the show today. Thank you for inviting me.
My pleasure. Like I said, I'm excited. I want to learn, and I do want to stop playing. I mean, it's a little cold outside, so that's going to be a question for whether it's outside, indoors, outdoors, and all that, and we'll talk about that. But so first things first, you are an adamant advocate. You're literally all over pickleball, and you have your own podcast, and you do this to make sure that there's awareness about it. But you and we had just a brief discussion, and I just discovered that this is nothing new. It's been in existence since 1965, right? Is that what you said?
Yes, it's really crazy. The game was actually invented in 1965 on Bainbridge Island. But really, all of a sudden, I would say the last 3-4 years, the game has just exploded. And there's probably right now 4 or 5 million people who play the game. So it's significant, and it's actually the fastest growing sport in America.
Well, that's actually the title of the episode. It's like, let's discover this fast sport that is going viral in the US. And hopefully after this show, when, after your podcast, it'll be all over, Canada and the rest of the world. I mean, people pick those up quick. And if it's available and it's accessible and easy to actually operate, I think there's going to find a nice little niche everywhere in the world. So let's define what pickleball is.
Pickleball is a game that combines a bunch of different sports. There's a part that's kind of like tennis, part that's like badminton, part that's like ping pong. And so it's a game which is played with something that's very similar to a wiffle ball. And you use a paddle rather than a racket. So there's no strings. It's just it's really a lightweight paddle with a solid surface. Paddle weighs about 8 ounces. You're hitting a wiffle ball, and it's played on a court, which is probably about half the size of a tennis court. So it's about 20 by 44 feet, which is exactly the same size as a badminton court, pretty close to the size of a racquetball court. And I would say most people who play the game actually play doubles, because it is a very, very social sport. So it's, it's an amazing game. There's, some rules and stuff we can talk about later on, but that's probably a pretty good introduction at this point.
Well, thank you. I mean, I can just visualize it. And I did actually take a quick look earlier and just to see what it looks like. And you're right. I mean, it's a combo of all the above. I mean, it looks like a tennis with a racquetball, and it's all mixed in with the lighter, I guess, smaller rackets and, well, they're not rackets really, like you said, paddles. and the ball is different. It's light, and so it's a unique. But I think the concept is similar, right? You're playing as teams. You got two sides of the court, and you work together and you compete. And but you're right. When you do teams, it's definitely a great thing for family fun, and it can definitely be good for, let's say, team building, exercises. Definitely great for fitness, because now that's going to lead me to the question. Like, I mean, what does a game look like? I mean, is it different sets, just like in tennis? I mean, what's the time frame? How long does each game, for example, play, or is there a scoring system to it? How does that work?
Yes, there is a scoring system to it. You play games to 11 points, and you only score points when you serve. So that is a little bit different than tennis. And then in terms of the game, a game can last actually 5 minutes. It could last 20 minutes. Interestingly enough, the more skilled you become, the longer the game lasts. And the reason for that is that pickleball is really very much about placement and accuracy, and less so about power. So whereas tennis is a very much a power game, there's really much more precision and strategy in pickleball. Now, don't get me wrong, there are times when the ball moves very, very fast because a lot of the game is played near the net. There's an area which is about 7 feet, which is 7 feet from the net on both sides of the court. And it's called the kitchen. Probably that's one of the first things you'll hear about in pickleball is the kitchen. And the idea is that you cannot volley the ball or hit it in the air if you're standing in the kitchen. So the reason for that rule is it's actually an equalizer. And it came from the inventors of the game because they were playing with kids and adults. And I guess one of the adults was very tall. And so they did not want them to have an advantage at the net. So that's why they kind of created the kitchen line, or that non-volley zone, really to equal the playing field. And that's another reason why I think the game is so popular, is that you can play and have fun on the same court for if you've got, teenagers, or if you've got 70-year-olds. It's a very much an intergenerational sport, and you can definitely enjoy it. And like I said, there's times when it does move very fast, but there's also times where you can kind of slow things down. So it's a great strategy game. It's much more like playing chess, whereas something like tennis is probably a little bit more like checkers.
I like that. That's a good analogy. Well, so it's funny that you talked about kitchen and then pickleball. So what's up with the name? I mean, it sounds like we're at a deli.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Now, there's really a couple different stories about how the sport got its name, but I think the one that, everybody really believes is the inventors of the game were three different families. I think they got together for, Labor Day or Memorial Day. And once they got to the point where they kind of invented the game, I guess they had a dog, and the dog loved to go chase after the wiffle ball, we'll call it, and, run off with it. And apparently the dog's name was Pickles. So hence the name Pickleball.
Well, I have to say the timing was perfect. Your dog just walked exactly as you mentioned dog.
I was wondering what you were looking at.
I know. I'm like, what the hell? That's like we didn't rehearse this one. I mean, that had to happen. I mean, it's amazing. Obviously, for the radio, they're not gonna get it. But I mean, for visual, it'll be like, you just mentioned dog, and then is that pickle? Oh, that's fun. Well, that's a pretty cool, story. I mean, yeah, and you're right. Now that you placed it there, it kind of makes sense. I mean, yeah, but it's an interesting, because you're right. I mean, tennis is a very powerful game, and I mean, sets can go forever, and you can do doubles, you can do teams, and so on and so forth. But it's an intense game, right? This one it can be just as intense, but it can be also light, practice, like light fun, but you can really do some real workout with it. For fitness purposes, it can fit all ages. You don't have to be, very fit to do this. Your cardio definitely is going to be there. You'll be moving a lot. So it not only it's fun, but it's also really good for you. And I mean, just picturing the whole game right now, and I have not seen one. And I do have questions about the court, because you did mention the court, the size of it and stuff. And one thing that probably people will be wondering right now, where are they available? Are they everywhere? Are they, in specific places? Are they in some, are they at schoolyards and things like that? Something of that nature is probably going to be a big question for people that are not familiar with it. So where do we play this?
It's really interesting. Nowadays, pickleball is literally played everywhere. You can go to your local park, and in some cases, the local park will take a tennis court, and then they'll draw lines on it for pickleball. But then there's also dedicated courts nowadays, which is just purely pickleball. Many schools now have it. And again, they are probably in the school setting, just really lining the pickleball court with the lines that make sense for it. But then you can also go to the YMCA, just about anywhere nowadays that has a gym where they play basketball. They will have lines on the court so you can play pickleball, and you've got portable nets, so it's really, really easy to set up. And interestingly enough, if you live in the Northeast like we do, you can certainly go to the indoor tennis centers. I can't imagine that there's, especially in the Northeast, a tennis center that does not have pickleball also now. But in some parts of the country, they have restaurants, very large restaurants, that they combine with pickleball courts. So, for example, there is a franchise called Chicken and Pickle, which is, in Kansas and in Texas, in a lot of different states now. And they have these large facilities with a wonderful restaurant, and then pickleball courts, which are both inside and outside. So, even somewhere like Texas, you figure it gets really hot during the summer. So they have the indoor courts, but then most of the year you can play on the outdoor courts, even in the winter. So, pickleball is literally everywhere.
Well, thank you for that cover. First of all, I love this restaurant business concept. You get to work out, not only get a fit, and get sweaty and get all excited, but then you build up a nice appetite, and here you go. And vice versa. If you ate and you want to just digest, maybe you get in the court. It's a good concept. It's fun. But you're right. I might have seen some of the lines, literally. I just may not have paid attention to them, because you're right. Sometimes you see a lot of things like in some of these courts, there's basketball, there is, sometimes volleyball stuff, and you don't even know. You play and that's it. But I didn't realize that there was enough of them, available all over the place, and I didn't even comprehend the concept until you really visualize it right now. You give us a nice little picture of what it looks like. And so people are listening, watching, like, oh, damn, that's what it was. You know what? Maybe that's what it is for real. And now I'm going to start looking for that everywhere. Because I have in my area, there's tennis courts, there is different, playgrounds, there's a high school, and they have the whole, different courts in the back. So I'm gonna have to go and check it out and ask my kids to see, hey, do you guys do this? Because my kids have not told me about it at all. There's no mention of it, but you never know. And you're right. Maybe we can have an introduction to the school system locally here. So we'll see.
Right, and that's a good point. Is in the schools now, pickleball is starting to be introduced into many of the schools. Apparently, in Washington and Oregon, so closer to where the sport was invented, they do teach pickleball in school. Now, I know in Florida, they're starting to teach pickleball in school. And I know there's also some areas in New York, but I think probably more up around Buffalo, where they teach pickleball in school. So it right now, it kind of depends on where you are in the country. And I know I had not heard of pickleball when I moved to Connecticut. So I moved to Connecticut about 3.5 years ago, and I had lived in Texas for 25 years. And then before that, I had lived in California. And I never heard of pickleball till I came to Connecticut. And I thought, well, what am I going to do during the winter? Because I've always been really active. So that's when I looked at the local recreation center and I saw something called pickleball. And it's like, living in Texas, that it was non-existent when I moved, to be honest. But, as it turns out, now 3.5 years later, pickleball it's exploded everywhere, but especially in Texas, it is absolutely amazing the number of people playing, the number of facilities they're building. If you think about Texas, there's a lot of land. So there's a lot of the big restaurants going in there with pickleball and just, dedicated facilities too. It's just amazing.
Wow. Well, again, like you said, you didn't see it before. 3 years later, it's all over. I'm pretty sure now that we know about it, how you think of something, you start seeing everywhere. Now all of a sudden, I'm gonna see, like, everywhere I'm gonna go, I'm gonna find a game, when I see a court and see people going for it. So it's gonna be interesting. But you're right. Like, I don't think in our school system here, at least in Central Jersey, that I've seen any of those activities or I heard of them. I know, like I said, one of the guests on the previous show, he mentioned something maybe about 25 minutes literally for me, that there's some sort of a court, and that was like my first introduction to the concept of this. Now it is growing. Why do you think it is growing? I mean, obviously there's a factor of fun, there's a factor of fitness, ease, multi-generational, concept. So is that what the drive behind the actual, I guess, becoming hot as a game?
You're right. I think it's all of the above. I think even though the game was invented in 1965, interestingly enough, the people that were attracted to pickleball were definitely in that, I would say, 55 and over age group. Became very popular in Florida, largely because it's a game that's super fun, but it's also much easier on your body because the ball's light, the court's smaller, the paddle's light, and you've got people who literally play into their 90s. So you kind of couple that with the fact that now the young people are really starting to get into pickleball. There's 2 professional tours, where you've got the young guns and their late teens and early 20s, and the sports being broadcast on ESPN, CBS Sports Network. And I think kind of you combine all that with the fact that, grandma can play with the grandkids and everybody can have fun. And so, and it's, pickleball is one of those things which is so much fun that, how people, a lot of people don't really like to go to the gym. They don't like to run. They don't like to ride their bike. But what happens when in pickleball is that, you'll play for a couple hours. You won't even think about it being 2 hours. And then you're like, oh yeah, I got to go. And then your friends will say, oh yeah, no, just stay for one more. And then 5 or 6 games later, so probably an hour later, you're still there, and that's a very unusual situation for exercise. And, a lot of people don't necessarily like to do that. But I'll tell you, if you try, I honestly have not ever heard of anybody who started to play pickleball and then actually quit, interestingly enough.
Well, I get the picture. I mean, that's like ping pong. When you're playing, you don't want to finish. You just keep playing, right? And it does get intense over time. But you're right. It's because it's fun, because it's light, and you're enjoying it. You're not feeling the brunt of it, and therefore you can keep going until your body says no more. I mean, you're tired. But you're right. It's the age group. I think in here, it's pretty much for everyone, and you can do at your own pace and your own intensity. And I'm pretty sure this is going to be a recommended, concept, even with doctors and physicians, when they recommend some sort of a cardio type of exercise, something that is low intensity, but also can be easier, especially with a family environment. I think that would be something that probably be recommended. Again, I haven't seen doctors, talking about this in terms of the fitness and part of it, but that's what we're doing here. We're sharing it so people can eventually see the value of this particular game and promote it as much. And really, listen, at the end of the day, again, as I started early on, fitness is a lot of things. I mean, you can be, tense, you can do some crazy stuff, and you can do some light stuff. But the main thing in health is that you want to be active, and you want to work some cardio, you want to some movement, some muscle, all the stuff. All your joints have to be good. That's good for all your ages and for all your, activities out there. It could be a good thing. And so this is definitely something that's going to be next generation, fun. And this reminds me, I mean, it's a little off, but when you remember the Wii game, when they had those tennis things and people got excited, you see them in senior center, you see them all over the place and have these screens and people, This is just that's more digital, computer like, like gaming, but it's more active gaming. This is actually just old school fashion sport that is combining different, styles, and it's just for everyone. It's like being, with your family picnic, and you can have a nice little good time on a park. And I'm sure parks are gonna pick this up quick if they haven't done. I mean, you'll probably soon you have a basketball court, you have a tennis court, you have a baseball, and next thing you have something, for pickleball. So that's a big deal. Now, do we, like you mentioned something about tournaments or like tours, right? Um, is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, the interesting thing about the game is that if you want to play competitively, you can. If you want to play socially, you can. It is amazing. There's, hundreds and hundreds and maybe up to thousands of tournaments in the US now, and some of them are, just local tournaments, some are very large ones which draw 2 to 3,000 people. So if you're somebody who really likes to be competitive, you can certainly do that. There's so many options pretty much now in every state in the union. And then, if you've got the international folks, I would say there's some, I would say that probably pickleball is growing just as fast in Canada as it does in the US, largely because you have so many snowbirds who go down to Florida and Arizona, and that's where pickleball is extremely popular. And interestingly enough, the sport is just starting to take off internationally. The growth isn't quite as explosive as the US, but I would say in another 3 years, it will be equal, if not greater. I mean, they're even having professional tournaments now in Europe. And so, they've got, certainly local tournaments, but now they have some professional tournaments also. So it's just absolutely going crazy.
Well, thank you for that. Well, the other thing is that sounds potentially easy is the cost here, because a lot of the sports can be expensive in gear and everything. It doesn't sound that this is going to be an expensive, take on. I mean, paddles, and I'm sure they're not going to be that expensive. I mean, of course, they get probably, upgraded to different levels, but in the core of them, they're not going to be that expensive. I'm sure some large surfaces will carry them, and in the sports sections, and that will be it. And then, like you said, you can be anywhere. Just put a net, put 7 feet out on both sides, and you have your kitchen, and you get to go. Let's have fun at the beach. It could be anywhere, and parks, and even if you don't have formal courts. Now, that's one thing I need to clarify. Is does the ball bounce on the ground, or doesn't have to? Because again, just the surface that you play in, because that changes dynamics. If it does bounce on the ground, I mean, you probably have, need an actual physical court and things. And if not, they can just be bouncing, the ball on the paddles across the net. So I'm assuming it's like tennis, as you said. So it does have to touch the ground, and therefore it has to be solid surface.
Very true. Yeah, it probably wouldn't work too well on the beach, but if it's a wood gym floor, because it does have to bounce, or cement that you play on outside, or your driveway. And that's one of the things that was, so great during the worst of the COVID-19 pandemic, was that I can't tell you how quickly Amazon and different places sold out of gear to play pickleball, because it is something that you can set up in your driveway. It is something, if you live in a cul-de-sac, that you can set up on the road, and then, you can draw your own lines, or, figure out some way to kind of get all the lines that you need for the court. And I believe it was the New York Post that really called pickleball the perfect pandemic sport. And it, largely again, because, you can take a family, living at home, stuck, at their house during lockdown, set up a court, and you're good to go. And, you mentioned earlier kind of the cost. If you want to get started, you can buy a couple paddles and a couple balls. They have sets, probably $50. And you don't need to buy a net necessarily, because most parks nowadays will have at least the lines for pickleball courts. If you decide you want a net, you can spend $50 to $100, if you want to be able to play it at your house. But there's, like you said, the cost of entry, there's not a huge barrier like there might be in, certainly something like golf or skiing, which is very expensive.
No, that's excellent. So at least for the folks. And by the way, the cost can be, maybe depends on the country, whatever. It could be, $100 can be different, for value, and depends where you are. But if it's a lighter, brunt, it definitely going to be like fire. I mean, it's just going to go everywhere and everybody can do it. And probably people will be creative with it anyways. You'll go get, you make your own paddles, you know what I mean? But you never know. I mean, I've seen that happen before. So, but yeah, people, I mean, this is really an exciting, opportunity for people to just get familiarized with this new sport. I mean, I shouldn't even call it new, because, when you said 1965, forget about it. There's nothing new about it. I mean, maybe not as old and, and known as previous games, or like your more, common games, but that's a lot of time that's been in existence, and it should be more. But you're right, it takes time. And I love the concept that you mentioned, like the pandemic. You're right. I mean, you think about a driveway, that's a perfect. You move the cars. If they're not in the garage, guess what? You have plenty of space to play. And that's exactly where you can do your thing. Streets, local streets and developments and things like that. Kids can actually play. Their parents can join in. You said even grandparents can be fun. It could be the whole family. I mean, tournament wise. And you're right. This could be something where people can compete, and you said already there's championships and things like that people are involved in around the world. You said Canada is picking up. I mean, obviously, I can see people taking it from the States and going there. And like right now, it's a bad winter. I'm assuming all the indoors places will probably have activities, and some people cannot do a real tennis match because it's a lot of intensity on their bodies and their cardio, whatever. Then this could be a good alternative. So it's pretty good. So the equipment, do you know where it's sold today? Like, you mentioned Amazon, but I know Amazon, everything has they have everything. You can imagine it, they probably have it. But like, in the local, Walmarts and stuff. I don't know if I've seen it at Walmart, and there's plenty of them around me in Jersey. So but like in other places, I mean, I'm sure it's gonna get close enough to where you can find it at any sports place, or even regular stores. It could happen. Malls, I don't know.
You're right. It's when I bought my paddle just about 3.5 years ago, I think I went to Dick's Sporting Goods. So, definitely any large sports retailer, probably anywhere that sells tennis rackets nowadays, they're going to have pickleball paddles too. And that was really the great thing, when I first got started. And I think it kind of shows you just kind of the vibe of the game. When I learned about pickleball, I went to the local gym just to watch. I Googled it at first, watched it on YouTube, and then I'm like, yeah, I think I probably really like that, because I had played some racquetball, a little bit of tennis. And so I went to the gym just to watch, and I kind of peeked my head in the door, and somebody immediately came up and said, hey, do you want to come try the game? And I'm like, you know what? I don't have a paddle. And they're like, they're like, oh, that's okay. So they dig in their bag, they pull out a pickleball paddle, and they're like, here, come and play. And so I didn't play a game, but I just hit the ball for 5 or 10 minutes, and the people were just incredibly friendly. So immediately after I played, I went to Dick's Sporting Goods and bought myself a paddle. And, at the time when I bought my paddle there, they probably had maybe a half dozen paddles that you could choose from. Now they probably have 50. I mean, it's just crazy.
I'm sure all the companies that actually manufacture these sport and equipment are gonna be all in it. I mean, it's coming up. I mean, you want to have a piece of the pie, right? So you're gonna get involved in it. I mean, I'm sure even like some of the brands like Nikes and all these guys, they usually get into all the sports gear, and this is gonna be a good way for them. Unless there's gonna be sometimes like some companies that specialize in some sports specifically, and they have like the best equipment. Maybe there's something that's going to come up with that as well. So let's see. Now you mentioned something interesting. The idea of someone with no physical background or no type of, activity, sports background can really engage in this and still have fun. I think that's the biggest piece about this. You don't have to know anything. You can just dabble with it, have some fun with it, and then slowly but surely get, good at it, because eventually you will. It's just a matter of time. But so it's not like, something that is intimidating. Like you play basketball. I mean, you get in the court, people are going to be like all over you. You're not going to know where to start if you haven't played before, right? I mean, this you can just play, and yeah, you're probably going to miss a couple of hits, but soon enough you'll be able to just do it and just enjoy it. So I think that's a big difference in maybe some other sports. I mean, you take on soccer or football or any of those, you need to know exactly what you're doing. It's a lot of strategy and things. I mean, I'm sure there's strategy here because you want to get that ball across and make sure that they don't take it back. But it's just a little less, in terms of intensity. And everybody gets the concept of racquetball, concept of tennis, in a way. I mean, all the sports, almost volleyball, they all kind of feel the same way. You got to get on the other side, and win, right? But there's less intensity here. So I think it makes it a lot easier for everyone to participate. And again, we talked about ages, but I think also about just your own background. You don't have to be fit really to do this. If you want to even lose, like we talk about losing weight, for example, it's a big, discussion always on the Fit and Fab channel. Weight loss is big, and sometimes there are a lot of recommendation to walk and do some activities that are less intense, and gradually get into it. And this could be just the beginning of something that you can do that's fun, yet you can see the results you want. And I think if you do this long enough and more, I guess frequently, you're probably gonna see quick results, because as long as you're moving your body and doing, you're gonna burn some calories, and you're definitely gonna have. To your point, the average person, we recommend to walk a half hour at least. Especially as folks age, 3 times a week. That's usually what the recommended rate, right? And if someone's playing 3-4 hours a day, just having fun, I mean, providing they have the time, that's going to make a difference for them. But really, it's going to help also their mental, physical, heart rate, inside out. I mean, it's a full package. So that's a great thing. Anything to add to that?
Absolutely. I have talked to, I would say, literally 3 to 4 people on the Pickleball Fire podcast who have lost 50, 75, 100 pounds playing pickleball, really without even trying. It's largely because they had been living very sedentary lives, and they heard about this game that's fun. Like you mentioned, you do not need any type of athletic background to be able to start to play, and you will still have fun. I always like to say, if you can, take a plastic ball and throw it underhanded and over the net, then you can play pickleball. So it is something which, not just the cost is a low barrier to entry, but also the physical skills that are needed. And what'll typically happen, and I can't tell you how many times this has happened, to me, is that, somebody will be new to the game, and, whereas I was the one watching the first day, somebody's over there on the sidelines, and you invite them to play, and you teach them the rules, and you hand them a paddle. And so it's, it, like you mentioned before, it is not a really, and not only not an intimidating game, it's really not an intimidating environment. It's a very inviting, very inclusive environment. So it's just, if you haven't ever played a sport, just, it's definitely worth giving it a shot. If you've played a sport, I can pretty much guarantee you'll love it. If you've played any type of racket sport, all you have to do is just get past the name, and you should be good to go.
Listen, I mean, I love the name. It's a cute name. It's fun, and you know what? Why not, right? I mean, volleyball. Hey, some things are just. I mean, when you think about it, football, you play with your feet. Volley, there's volleys involved. So again, I mean, you can just kind of almost define certain things based on what they are. This was a little different, but the story behind it makes a good sense if it started exactly with that. And so, hey, why not? So you talked about the rules. What are some of the key rules that people would need to learn? And if they're going to play for the first time, and let's pretend they just go and they hear the show right now, they buy from Amazon a set, and they just want to play. I'm sure it's going to come with some instructions, but what will be like some of the things that they would probably need to know in terms of rules?
I would go ahead and, you'll hear about the kitchen, which we talked about in terms of that rule. There's also another rule called the double bounce rule. And what that means is that if I serve the ball over the net, the opposing team has to let the ball bounce, and then they return it. and then that's one bounce, and then the returning team hits it back to me, who's the server, and again the ball has to bounce, so that's the second bounce. And the reason for that is to equalize the game again. So if you think about tennis, the server's got this huge advantage, because they can hit this big, powerful serve, and the returner, might have some difficulty returning it. Whereas in pickleball, when I hit my serve, I should also mention that basically the serve is an underhand serve. So you do not get a big advantage of, hitting that really hard serve like you do in tennis. And so everything kind of with the rules is meant to have an equalizing, so no team or no athletic body type, if you're tall, have a big advantage over anybody else. And that's why I've got people that I've talked to on the podcast and who are very high level amateur players, and they're in their 70s. And I said, well, can you play against people in the same division who are in their 20s? And they said, oh yeah, game for game, I'll beat them, or I'm right there. And they said the only drawback once you get to your 70s is that you might get a little, it's actually over time, you might get a little tired in the semifinals and the finals if you make it that far. Because the way most pickleball tournaments are structured, you play pretty much, if you're playing mixed doubles or men's doubles or women's doubles, you play that whole day, just one division. So if you get to the finals, you can easily be playing 7-8 hours. I mean, it is endurance. I mean, it is not a sprint. You could do some sprinting during the game, but you really do have to be in pretty good shape, but that's for the serious players.
Well, that's an excellent point, because if you really start as for fun, right, and you start picking this up as a habit and you're doing it, I mean, you actually are building your stamina, your cardio, you're getting good at it, and if over time you will be able to manage to go through the whole tournament without sweat. I mean, certainly age will have some, I mean, to a degree, I don't want to make that a rule, because age may not necessarily be a handicap or a disability or any type of hindrance to anyone, because you can do it at any given age. And that I've seen people do terrific stuff at, and really, really advanced age, and they're actually better than some of the younger folks, sort of thing. So, but you're right. It's just a matter of, if you really can do this and you're playing this, you probably are good at it. Eventually, if you're going to get into a tournament, you're going to be able to make it through. And so that's actually a great thing to hear, because, this is something I want to do with, my kids. I want to make sure, like, even my mom and other folks would love to have them play with me. I don't know if my mom can do it, but she's got her own illnesses. But the idea is that will be something that can possibly, entertain other folks that may otherwise not be interested in any physical activity. This can get them into it. I can just see them like, oh, let's do this. I think we can get you. And then you throw in some fun in there, and I think it's just going to be some good. Now, you said something about, tournaments and professionals, and you mentioned even ESPN. I didn't even know that this will be played on ESPN. I didn't think that they would have it, but that's a great thing to hear, because now people can actually watch some serious games and see. And like everything else, I'm sure this thing is going to get even more intense, and people are going to take it to the next level and the next level, and it's going to become more competitive and more, crazier. And that would be great. I mean, trophies, tournaments, World Cups, and you never know. I mean, this can be the next generation, literally sport. And it's happening. This is what I'm hearing, and I'm getting it, from your vibe. This is going to be one of the key plays and sports in the US and probably in the world in just due time in the next few years. And I think the pandemic did contribute to that, because you're right. A lot of people may have picked it up. People were just couldn't go anywhere. So something that you can do at home, and people actually looked for equipment during the pandemic, couldn't find it. So something like this can be easily kind of made or created, or potentially bought from somewhere. But at the end of the day, it could have, made a difference. And I'm sure it did in a lot of lives. So that's a big deal. Now, I want to ask you a question about your podcast. So what is it called? Pickle Fire podcast?
Pickleball Fire.
Pickleball Fire. So I love that. I mean, now how long you've had that podcast for?
Just about a year and 3 or 4 months. So it was something that started during the pandemic. At the time, I actually was, pretty, definitely it was just getting into the cold weather season here in Connecticut, and I was, you know, wasn't doing anything, wasn't going anywhere. I was pretty depressed, and I realized I had all this time on my hands. So that's how I started the podcast. But then just like the sport, I mean, the podcast really took off. And typically on Mondays, I'll do an episode where I talk to a professional player or somebody who's an instructor and is giving tips that can help your game. And then on Thursday, I'll talk to somebody from the industry. It could be a paddle manufacturer, could be somebody who's running tournaments, just, something a little bit different that, kind of rounds out the week. And then interestingly enough, I found that I had so much content with the podcast that I decided to start a magazine. So I also have the Pickleball Fire magazine,
Nice.
and write up the interviews from the show. And actually, I had the opportunity to partner with the International Federation of Pickleball, which is the group that is going to bring pickleball to the Olympics. So now Pickleball Fire magazine is their official publication. And so it's really, in terms of the international aspect of the sport, I think the IFP now has 70 member countries. So they are well on their way to doing all the things that are needed to make pickleball an Olympic sport.
Wow. That is impressive. And I have to commend you for it. I mean, that's great stuff. In less than a year, I mean, you've taken it to a whole different level, and, rightfully so. It's well deserved. And I mean, literally talking about the industry, talking about some of the key players, tips and stuff like that. And now even in the Olympic, potential and the magazine, that's great achievement. So folks, as you listen and watch, please do check out the podcast and, follow in and see how this can, benefit you. And you can learn from the professionals that come on the podcast, and definitely learn also about, the different tips and, plays and just the next, level where it's going. And that's going to be a great thing. So definitely check it out. And I'll have actually the description or the link to it in the description of the show, so people can click on and just transfer to you. So let me ask you a question. I know you play, and you've adopted this as your thing. Have you seen any yourself in your health, any benefits, from it that really are worth, I guess, talking about?
My experience is really interesting with pickleball, because what I would say about that is, I guess it was about 8 years ago, I tore my ACL, and which is a ligament in my knee. And I chose not to get surgery because it's a year-long recovery. And I at that point in my life, I just said, okay, I'm not going to do that. Now, the drawback about not getting the surgery is that, I can walk, I can run, but you're really not supposed to do any activity which involves pivoting or side to side. So anything that's a court sport, which is largely what I played and enjoyed, I kind of gave all of them up for 5 to 6 years. And when I looked at pickleball, I thought, as you move up in levels, it does require a lot of movement on the court. But when I first got started, I looked at the game and I thought, I really don't have to move that much. I think with my knee, I can do that. And so for me, the game completely changed what I was doing in my life. Now, I'm always somebody who I can't sit still for more than an hour or so. I've got to get up and do something active. So that's why I wasn't too worried about not being able to play court sports, is because I can always find something to do, whether it's lift weights, walk, what have you, ride a bike. And pickleball it changed my life, because it brought me back to what I had been doing my whole life, except for those 5 years. So for me, just a huge, not only physical benefit, but mental benefit too, because, when I'm active, that's truly what I enjoy doing, is being on some type of court with some type of ball.
Well, that's an inspirational, story right there, and motivational story right there. Because to your point, I mean, something that happened to you and almost prevented you from doing something you love. Here comes pickleball and kind of gets you back into your, whatever you enjoyed, and that's a big deal. You clearly stated something about the mental health, and most people sometimes don't connect the two. Mental health is really, the driver behind a lot of things. If your mental health is good, everything else can be good. Your physical health will be also in part with that. So it's important to work those, and something that can change your life for better and get you that mental, health, and get you like real in the right spirits. That's going to be a big deal, a big life changer. So listen, I mean, we don't have to say more about that. I think the story is clear. The message is clear. We want people to start discovering this, and I mean, you're probably discovering if you're listening to this, but let's get to it. Let's see if you can enjoy it, pick it up, and make it a fun thing for the family and and friends. And again, I will definitely, once the weather gets a little better, I think I'm gonna use this also in team building and getting people out there and doing some activities with the crew, and that will be fun. So I think that's a big deal, and it's all good. It's a win-win for all. You get your health, you get your mental, you get some fun, you get to socialize. You said it also earlier about the social aspect of it. You probably can meet people that you have not met on the court, and that's usually what happens in sports and some of these activities. You're in the indoors or you're in the outdoors. I mean, that means you're in a better area in terms of air and so on and so forth. So it's got all these benefits. I don't think there's anything. Now, the only thing I want to ask is, obviously we're not doctors, we're not going to talk about that, but are there any limitations or anything that, obviously depends on the intensity of the person's health, there might be some, potential where there's a risk. Obviously, people, we have to tell them as a disclaimer, and everything that they do in fitness, always consult with your, provider and your physicians before you enterprise in anything, because then do not go crazy and then you hurt yourself. You have to make sure, like you said, if you have joints problems, anything that could be risky where you're going to hurt yourself, always double check before you get into these whatever sport or activities you do. So that's just the one thing I wanted to add to that. Anything else on your side?
What I would say is that if you are looking to have some fun and get some exercise in a way that doesn't feel like exercise, get up off that couch and try pickleball. My guess is that, 99% of the people who try it will continue to play it and stay with it. So it couldn't be more fun, more social, more inclusive. So, just go out and try the game.
Well, listen, with those words, I think, we've covered a lot of grounds. I appreciate it. I mean, we've literally pretty much shed light on what the game is and who can play and where to do it. And it's all the aspects of the game. So folks, again, you're watching, you're listening. This is a good opportunity. Try it out. There's nothing to lose, and you're probably going to have fun with it. I'm going to try it out. Maybe I'll take some videos and post them on my media. Like, hey, I took on pickleball here. So let's do that. And it would be fun, I mean, for people to do this. So folks, again, first of all, then thank you for being with us and sharing your real love and passion about, this particular sport. And you've done a terrific job already promoting out there, and you continue to do that. And I'll track you as well on your podcast and make sure that we listen to some of the stuff that's available there. And folks, thank you for your time, for watching with us and listening on iHealth And your host, Hurricane H, with Lynn, and we'll talk soon. Different show, different topic, different guest. Bye for now.